Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to welcome you to Tony Evers' hometown of Madison, Wisconsin. I'll put Governor Evers at the microphone in just a few minutes, but I just want you to know how much we appreciate the opportunity to really express to all of you, and hopefully therefore to the people of the state of Kansas, our real questions and our concerns, particularly about the reconciliation bill that was just passed in Congress. Each of us will have a story to tell about the impact that this will have on our states, and none of those stories are going to be pretty. In Kansas alone, I mean, we're not a Medicaid expansion state, so everybody thinks, well, we're going to get off pretty easy. No, we're not. Because in the last 10 years or so, we left $8 billion back in Washington, D.C. by not expanding Medicaid. And what that has done to crumble our healthcare infrastructure in Kansas is indescribable. Our rural hospitals in particular are extremely at risk. We've already closed 10 of them in those 10 years, and many more on the brink. And this reconciliation bill is going to throw them over the edge. And then, of course, we have our hungry children and our hungry families who are going to be decimated by the cuts to the SNAP programs. Kansas has already done enough damage, quite honestly, to folks who rely upon SNAP or TANF. And now to have this added on top of it, I fear for what will happen with those particular families. And I hear so often, well, we're just going to give this back to the states. This is just giving the responsibility back to the states. None of these systems, whether you're talking Medicaid, you're talking SNAP, or you're talking FEMA, none of these systems were set up to rely on states being able to do it themselves. They were set up with the federal government as a very robust partner. And without them being a partner, there is no way that states, any of our states, will be able to pick up the tab. The best we can do is perhaps mitigate the pain, but even that will be difficult. So with that, I want you to know that all of us, are united on at least one thing. We are Democrats, and so we tend to have our own way, which is a good thing, I think. But we are united on this particular issue, that there's nothing in that reconciliation bill that would benefit our states or our constituents. And we are doing what we can to fight against it. And we then, in our own states, we're doing everything we can to mitigate that pain that it's going to cause. With that, I'm going to give it over to Governor Evers, who owns this microphone.
It's great to be here, and thanks, Governor Kelly. I also want to thank all the fellow governors and the DGA for this incredible opportunity to come and have this meeting in Wisconsin. It's been an honor to have all of you here in Wisconsin's capital to talk about the fights that we're doing together, and about why Democratic governors have to be at the center of how we fight back and help families across our country. Let me be clear about what's happening. President Trump and the congressional Republicans are trying to gut programs that Wisconsin families count on and depend on, and are willing to break our constitutional system to make that happen. Whether it's Republican budget or the continued illegal action to fire Wisconsin workers, strip funds away from our state, damage public education, we have to fight, and we are. The Republican Party isn't just, their budget is not just bad policy, it's devastating for states like Wisconsin. They're going to slash Medicaid funding, a program that helps 1 in 5 Wisconsinites, the care that they need. They want to cut nutrition assistance, which feeds 90,000 Wisconsin families. And they want to eliminate job training programs that help our workers and have been really important for us as a state to compete in the 21st century. While Wisconsin just passed a bipartisan budget that invests in our kids, cuts taxes for working families, and supports our rural hospitals, Trump and the congressional Republicans are moving in just the opposite way. They're closing tax breaks for billionaires over healthcare for seniors. They're choosing corporate giveaways over supporting our families. But here's what I want Wisconsin families to know: Democratic governors aren't gonna just sit and idly watch this happen. When Trump tried to strip hospital funding, we moved real quickly to protect $1.5 billion in healthcare funding for Wisconsin. When they threaten our schools, we stand up and fight back. When they attack programs that matter to working families, we find ways to fill the gaps. The contrast couldn't be clearer. While Republican governors fall in line behind Trump's agenda, Democratic governors are standing up for the people that we serve. And here's a bigger picture. In 2026, Wisconsinites and voters across this country will make a choice about the future of our state when they elect our next governor. We're going to choose a leader who will work together to expand health care, support working families, and build an economy that works for everybody. While Trump tries to tear down everything we built, that Democratic governors are proving that government can work for people and get stuff done. Now, it's my honor to turn things over to a governor who knows that better than anybody, and that's Governor Andy Beshear. Thank you.
I want to thank Governor Evers for hosting us, and I want to thank him for his service to Wisconsin and to this entire country. I know that his leadership is not going to end just because the title might, and that he is going to be out there fighting for what he believes in, moving into the future. Today, you see that America's Democratic governors stand united against the actions of this administration that threaten the health care and the livelihood of our families. Donald Trump's big, ugly bill is the single worst, most devastating piece of legislation that I have seen in my lifetime. It is a direct attack on rural America. And what it means for my people is so difficult to comprehend. I mean, but because of this piece of legislation, 200,000 Kentuckians, 200,000 of my neighbors are going to lose their health care coverage. 20,000 Kentuckians are going to lose their health care jobs. That's right. This bill fires 20,000 people in Kentucky alone. And up to 45 rural hospitals are threatened with closure, or at least will announce fewer lines of service. This is going to impact the economy of rural America in very profound ways, because those are fewer doctors, fewer nurses, fewer people who work in that hospital that are going to the local coffee shop, that are going to the local restaurant, that are going to the local bank. The impact is going to be significant. I believe that we have to push back, that we have to fight back, and that we have to stand united, because the only way to avoid what is going to be significant pain is to ultimately rescind this bill. I'm going to turn it over now to Governor McKee, and I missed that number. It is 35 rural hospitals in Kentucky.
Thank you, Andy, and it is a distinct privilege and honor to be here today with my fellow governors, and certainly the budget issue is the primary thing we're talking about today, but another example of governors sticking together when the Republican governors seem to find a safe place to hide is the fact that we're the ones who are proceeding with the legal claims. Just recently, $6 billion nationally was freed up for education help for during summer programs that was counted on and was budgeted. Who stood up for that? The governors. The governors I'm standing with, and the governors that are members of the DGA. And who's not standing up? Yet they benefited from our work. The people around the entire country benefit from the work that the governors provide and the leadership that the governors provide. So Rhode Island is no different than Kansas, no different than Wisconsin, no different than my friends over here in their states as well. We have hundreds of thousands of people, 300,000 people right now that are on Medicaid in the state of Rhode Island. And we're fearful that many of those will not have the health coverage that they have had in the past to keep their families healthy and safe. In Rhode Island, we're working on issues that have to do raising education levels for all our students in our state. That's going to be impacted. And tell me, how does that help a state like Rhode Island reach its goals when you're taking away education aid. We're looking at raising incomes. So how does it help raising incomes in our state when people are losing their jobs and that impacting in ways the budget impacts the way that we can actually deliver the services that we need to provide, and then certainly the medical benefits. 144,000 Rhode Islanders have SNAP, and they rely on that. And yet, what's going to happen when what hits the fan? And the fact of the matter is that the federal government, through the Trump administration, the Trump's budget, and the budget that was passed by the Republicans in Washington, is no more than a bait and switch. It is basically taking the responsibility, using our money, because we send our money to Washington, and then we expect that it's returned to us in ways to help our states. And yet all it's done is move responsibility from the federal government onto the states. And as mentioned, we're not going to be able to absorb the significant reduction in funding that's coming our way. And who's going to either pay for that? The taxpayers are going to pay for it in our states, or the benefits are going to get reduced. So I'm happy to be here again. Thank the DGA, the opportunity, thank the media that here is listening to the real story that's happening in this country. And the reason why Democratic governors are stepping up to make sure that we protect not only our state, but we partner together to protect our residents that live in our states. And in a crazy way, we're protecting people around the entire country by the work that we're doing. And I really am proud to be here with Governor Walz, and certainly he had a journey last year that we are very proud of you taking, and we are really honored, again, to have you here today to speak on behalf of the people of Minnesota.
Thank you, Governor. Thanks to my friend and neighbor, Governor Evers, putting on a great show here, and to all of DGA, to Chair Kelly and Vice Chair Bashir. They're working hard, but the American people are reflecting in the hard work they're doing with historic fundraising numbers and engagement with Democratic governors, who, I remind folks, represent the majority of the American public and a vast majority of the American economy. Many of our states are payer states. We put more into the federal government than we get back. On Wednesday, we celebrate the 60th anniversary of Medicaid, an incredible program to lift people up. You've heard it from our states, 70% of our children are on that, the vast majority of our rural nursing homes. In Minnesota, this piece of legislation will kick 140,000 people off, costing about $1.2 billion. But it's not about the dollars, and it's not just saying 140,000 people. These are families that have access to health care. It means that they stay healthy and they go to work. I was with the CEO of Fairview Hospital the other day, and he described our healthcare system as a Jenga tower, and he said this is one of the ones that you can't pull out. And he says that because, be very clear about this, the reimbursement rates are already very thin around Medicaid, but if that comes out and people drop off, and then the subsidies go off the ACA on the exchanges, people will drop off. The healthiest ones, our risk rules will include. And he said, you know what this really is? This is a hidden tax on business. And the business community needs to stand up because they have no choice except to pass on this cost to the employers. And this whole argument was what? Was this about reducing the national debt? Is that what this was about? Because it adds $3.4 trillion to the debt. Was it about improving people's lives? There's not a single person that's improved by this move that they put in, other than the minority of people. And I keep hearing tell about this. They often talk about minorities are hurting this country. That minority of billionaires is hurting this country, and their incessant need to see tax breaks on the back of working Minnesotans, working Kentuckians, folks across this country. So I'm proud to be with Democratic governors. We have to work together. We have to make the trains run on time and get our children in school and get folks fed. We have to make sure we have clean drinking water. This piece of legislation alone, because of hell-bent on deciding to reject the science around climate, but it's even more than that. By rejecting what they're doing and forcing us to buy and unshutter dirty coal plants, it's estimated that Minnesota's utility bills will go up 28% over the next 2 biennia. That's the type of thing that this piece of legislation did. So while we celebrated 60 years of a visionary program that was celebrated by Democrats and Republicans bipartisanly, this president's incessant desire to tear everything down that was done before him at the expense of the American people is causing incredible damage. That's why I'm proud to stand with the folks who are here. proud to stand with a group of people who are fighting to make sure they get things done. And listening to these folks, you hear it. We just passed an incredibly good bipartisan piece of legislation in Minnesota, and we have the closest divided legislature in the country. Smart investments, tax cuts for the middle class, things that make a difference on innovation and growth. So glad to be here today, glad to be sharing ideas with folks that are here, glad to be standing up. And I think Governor McKee is right about this, that it's, and each one of them said it, it's Democratic governors and our attorney generals who are challenging these reckless and in many cases unconstitutional and unlawful moves. And it just keeps piling on. But the one thing is, we will not get tired. We will not back down. We will continue to stand with the people of our states to improve their lives. With that, I'll turn it back to our chair.
All right, we'll take questions if you've got any. If you want to direct them to a particular governor, feel free.
Governor, thank you for having this press conference. A couple questions, and hoping that perhaps you and Governor Beshear can respond at least. One is your response to the Texas Republican redraw. You know, if other Democratic governors, some have said that there should, in the Democratic states, the redraw to align, to counter what's happening in Texas. What is your response? And two, you mentioned the president's one big beautiful bill, the legislation. What is your response? There's a lot of news over the last 24 hours over his tariffs and his announcements. Is there, opening to anyone wants to respond, but
Okay. On the first question on the Texas redistricting, first of all, I think it's going to be ruled unconstitutional. You know, it clearly will go to court. So we'll see. But in the meantime, I think it's incumbent upon Democrat governors, if they have the opportunity to respond in kind. I'm not a big believer in unilateral disarmament. I love bipartisanship. That's how my entire career in the state Senate and now as governor has operated. And I do everything I possibly can to bring the parties together to come to consensus. This is clearly a situation where they're not asking for input. And so I think we need to respond in kind, which I think we do to protect the American people. If they are allowed to succeed, we know what will happen. And things are bad enough in Washington right now. What it would look like if there's even a greater majority that this president controls, God help the United States of America. So I think it's incumbent upon us to respond.
They're bad.
Yeah, they are. Tariffs are a tax on the American people, and it's going to make it harder for that American family that is already struggling to pay the bills, that may have voted for Donald Trump because he said he'd make it easier to pay those bills. Most won't be able to get by. My state is projected to get hit by tariffs harder than anywhere. And we have more people that are living right on those margins, and we have more small businesses that aren't going to be able to absorb these costs and are already starting to lay people off. I look at the fact that most people in my state might get a couple $100 out of this continued tax break. Yet the Yale study says it's about $2,700 in extra costs on every American family. So think about how bad that deal is for Americans, certainly for Kentuckians. At the end of the day, this is hurting our people and it's hurting our national reputation. The idea that we would push Japan and South Korea towards China is bad for our national security, and long-term it's going to be bad for our economy. The idea that we would take the EU, which its countries are important allies to the United States, and create the type of hostility we're seeing, or that one of our most important allies and friends, Canada, would be attacked repeatedly by a president of the United States was unthinkable before this current administration. So this tariff policy hurts our family, hurts our standing in the world, makes us less secure, and again, it's going to be a betrayal of those families that were already struggling to pay the bills, and they thought that he was the candidate that would help.
Could you and Governor Walz respond to the redistricting question, and also Governor Kelly, what do you mean by responding behind?
Well, I think that there are some governors who are considering looking at their maps in their particular states, and so that's what I mean. Is I hate the fact that we're here, that we even have to consider something this drastic. And I do think ultimately, both will be found unconstitutional, whether it's coming from a red state or a blue state. But in the meantime, just in case, I think it's incumbent upon them to do what needs to be done to protect the United States.
Do the other governors agree? Sure.
Yeah, having served in Congress, I first got asked after my first term there, well, how would you fix Congress? And my response was, which we have a small one. I said, campaign finance reform and nonpartisan judicial redistricting. And I believe very strongly in that. But I also agree with Governor Kelly very strongly that this move is unconstitutional. It's again breaking the system. It's again meant to game the system. I want to stress again, Democratic governors, whether 23 of us, represent the majority of the public and a large majority of the economy. And in many cases, by gerrymandering and moving things around, it's an unfair representation. Now, that being said, we go back to the unilateral disarmament. The Democrats are expected to have the decorum, we're expected to protect the institutions, we're expected to follow the rules on this. We're not playing with a normal administration, we're playing one that's throwing all the rules out of there. And if the courts that he has packed aren't going to do that, then I think it is incumbent upon states that have the capacity or the ability to make sure that we are responding in kind. It is a terrible spot we're in as a country, but not responding is going to make it even worse. So I agree with Governor Kelly.
Donna, could you talk a little bit more about the hidden cost of business of the Trump budget bill and also the tariffs and the others would like to?
Yeah, we start with energy. Just so we're Midwestern folks, we're part of MISO, the grid and how we exchange energy. Much better situation, I might add, than Texas. It's on their own and you have the blackouts and all of that. But the point is this is going to force all of our ratepayers in all of our states in the Midwest to pay for bringing back and updating a coal-fired power plant in Michigan to try and make up for the difference from the clean energy that's already reached parity price. That is going to raise utility rates 28%. For individual families, that'll be higher bills. For businesses, that will be passing on the cost to consumers. And the issue around healthcare is the CEO made it very clear. And before he spoke, he said, I'm sure my team's going to be not happy about this, but I'm just going to speak about this. And he just simply said, you know how this works, that they make up with the private plans and the business plans for people in healthcare to make up for the Medicaid piece that's already very marginal on reimbursement rates. When those are gone, when the healthy people drop off the system, when we have a smaller pool, insurance costs for businesses are going to go up and they're going to be passed on to them by the hospitals. And as Andy said, those are big systems. Small rural hospitals don't have that capacity and they will close. We're already seeing emergency rooms shutter. We're seeing birthing centers close and consolidate. And that is going to, again, I think each of these said it, and those of us who all represent some rural areas, they're going to get hurt the worst.
Question for, sorry, I was hoping Governor Bashir could also address
Sure.
that one because.
I can give you a very specific example. This was shepherded through the House by Brett Guthrie. Brett Guthrie's district not only has numerous rural hospitals, but we announced 3 of the 5 biggest battery plants on planet Earth in his district. That is 7,000 potential Kentucky jobs that at least it may take us longer to bring into effect. I mean, when you undermine what would have been passed into law, what businesses had relied upon to make major decisions on investment, and you're going to ultimately hit employment. And the idea that we had so many congressmen or women and senators vote for something that every single projection showed would cost jobs in their district, would slow down the economy, and ultimately would have people lose health care is just unconscionable. I mean, we are supposed to be Americans first and Democrats and Republicans second and third. They swear an oath oftentimes with their hand on a Bible I try to follow, that says that they will support and uphold the Constitution and ultimately do their best for their people. Well, putting your party or your president before what's best for your people is just not doing your job.
Governor Walz and Governor Kelly, on redistricting, just to follow up quickly on that, when you said we need to respond in kind, Governor Newsom of California has obviously indicated some interest in looking at California's maps. But I wonder if this does continue to escalate. Republicans have more opportunities to gerrymander their maps than Democrats do. Missouri, Florida, New Hampshire, Indiana, those are all states that could do it quickly and have the power to change it quickly, whereas, blue states, New York couldn't do it without changing its state constitution, that would take several years. There are more redistricting commissions in blue states. Is there a risk here that if this continues to escalate, that ultimately you guys may still come out losers because there's just not as many opportunities to do that kind of work?
I would say this, look, we're all gonna come out losers because Donald Trump started this to break the system, to try and make sure, because he's unpopular, they are going to lose the midterm election. So he's doing everything he can. So yes, I think there's validity in what you're saying. There's also states that they can't gerrymander, like South Dakota, like North Dakota, and some of those states. This is not a good way to move this. And I hope, as Governor Kelly said, is the American people start to hear this. But yes, I worry about that. And that's why I don't think it's a good idea. That's why I think it needs to be struck down as unconstitutional. And to be quite candid, that's why we try not to do it in our history as a country. We try to have fair districts. And we know that people have tried this forever. We've seen the snake districts as they've been put together. This is just a more blatant saying the quiet part out loud. But yeah, your question's valid. I do worry about that.
Yeah, I mean, is there a risk, Governor Kelly, that this sort of spirals?
There's a risk of doing nothing.
Yeah, Governor Walz just said what I was going to say, that there's a bigger risk in doing nothing. We can't just let this happen and act like it's fine and hope that the courts fix it. We have no idea, quite honestly, at this point, what the courts might do. But by virtue of us responding in kind, we do send a message. We're not going to take this line down. We will put up a fight. And when we put up that fight, who's going to be paying attention? The American people are going to be paying attention. And then they're going to recognize who's really on their side. Because they'll understand what this gerrymandering is all about. So I don't think it's a conversation that the Republicans really want to have. I think they like to just slip it under the rug. But that won't happen if they continue along this vein. And I think they're less likely to continue if we respond.
Can you really put it up the maps in any of your 5 states? I don't see it. You can't.
Not in mine.
I don't know.
I could, but what would I do? I just give them another Republican. Don't worry, I'm not going that way.
You guys have time for 2 more quick questions.
No, ours is dictated. Look, I said this, and Iowa does this very, very fairly. They do nonpartisan judicial redistricting that are agreed to be fair. We write our partisan maps that they're always thrown out in court by Republican and Democratic judges, and they write them. And I think it's agreed in Minnesota, they're fair.
I'm not being asked, but I'm from Rhode Island, and I'll kind of weigh in here a little bit. Look, this is part of the chaos that is coming from Washington. I talk to people every day in my state. They're very unsettled. They don't have a lot of confidence on what's coming out of Washington right now. And this is just more of the chaos with this redistricting strategy. So they're just going to keep on piling on and piling on. And what happens, you ask them, well, how this is going to impact health, education, or economy. When you undermine the confidence of the people who live in our states, collectively in the country, and this, by the way, this is not just blue states and red states. This chaos is causing a great deal of unsettling in the minds of the people who live in the state, in the country, and clearly in the state of Rhode Island.
I have a question for Governor Evers, but anyone can jump in afterwards. So alongside this bill, recently, multiple federal departments passed notices barring undocumented and certain illegal immigrants from federal public benefits under orders from the Trump administration. Can you guys speak to what that, alongside this bill, what impact it will have on immigrant population, as well as what people can do there?
Well, all that is true and all that is horrible. In the state of Wisconsin, we have tens of thousands of undocumented folks that every day do the work of in our farms and our manufacturing plants. And it's a monetary thing, but the most important thing, it is the worst of the worst we can be as human beings. You think about just that. Think about it in terms of the work that is done by undocumented folks in the state of Wisconsin. First of all, Trump in one day says, well, we're not going to take and move those folks that work in our farms. The very next day, he says, we are going to remove those people that work in agriculture. Now, these people are human beings that have been here for a long time. And for Governor for a president to say something like that and send chills up the spines of tens of thousands of workers that are doing the great work, it's beyond belief, in my opinion. We're gonna do everything we can to protect our workers and our friends and neighbors, frankly, from going through that. But it just goes to show what this is all about. It's a bold president that does bold, stupid things. And that what he encouraged in Texas, I mean, I couldn't have, when I first read that, I thought, this has got to be wrong. The President of the United States is asking a state, hey, we're short some folks here, let's change the maps. That is so un-American, and it's a constant threat to our democracy. And so I'm really pissed, frankly, and we are going to do whatever we can do to stop this from happening.
Okay, last question. Yeah. Last
Well,
one.
Governor, do you agree with what the other governor said about needing to retaliate in kind in other states, given what Texas is doing? Because you campaigned both times on ending gerrymandering in Wisconsin, and eventually got a
Right.
Supreme Court decision in your favor. So, is this the way to go?
When you come up against, you're up against the wall, you have to do whatever you can to stop it. Now, yes, we're not changing our maps here in the state of Wisconsin. We worked hard to get fair maps, and we're gonna continue to do so. Because of those fair maps that we had, we were able to pass a relatively bipartisan budget, and it was a good budget. And so, in my heart of hearts, this is where we have to be. But when you're up against, you have a gun against your head, you gotta do something. And so collectively, I think it has to be examined so that the president can rethink his stupid.
With all of the you've been talking about with redistricting, with the budget bill, do you worry that too many Democratic voters are still caught up in thinking about recriminations about Joe Biden or about the 2024 campaign? This question that's actually not just for Governor Walz. But that is where too many Democratic voters in that sort of still turning on themselves, turning on all new approaches.
I'll answer that, but first, I would like to go back to the question about undocumented and SNAP. And, that is one of the myths that is being pushed out there about, who gets benefits. I can tell you in Kansas, we don't provide benefits for people who are here undocumented. We just don't. We have a screening system that ensures that happens. But they're using that so that they can say, we're not really cutting Medicaid benefits, we're just eliminating fraud and abuse. And that's BS. That is not at all what this is about, because by and large, those benefits are not going to people who are undocumented. They're going to hardworking, in my case, hardworking Kansans, not anybody else. So, I really would appreciate it if the press would make that clear, that we're being fed a line. And the more we repeat that, the more we ask questions to validate that, the worse harm we're doing to everybody in the country.
Thank you guys so much.
Wait, what about the question that I asked?
We're all done.
Look, I would end, if we're Democrats, of course they're going to do that. That's what we do. We ruminate on it. What happened there? The reality is, you heard here, there's not time. Like, I think folks can do that. You need to learn from the past and all that. But we are in an emergency situation with this guy, and I think Democrats understand how to fighting forward and making the case. And I think we're out here flooding the zone, bringing up good ideas, and I'm trying to make the case is, why did so many people stay home? And there can be a very different timeline than we're on if we get busy here, elect 2 Democratic governors in Virginia and New Jersey, and then hit into next year, and that's where I'm focused. Thank you all.
Thank you all. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Sam. Thanks for hosting